I was gearing up for a few really busy days when I noticed that Stewie wasn't acting quite right. I think he's feeling a little bit extra down since he did get vaccinated yesterday. So before I do anything else today, I'm going to make sure that he's doing all right and maybe give him something to help him be a little bit more comfortable. Okay. It's not uncommon for some of these horses to have a little bit of a reaction when they get vaccinated. Stewie does have a rather high temperature, so I'm going to give him some anti-inflammatories and observe him for the rest of the day. Before I do that, I'm just going to take all of his vitals and write them down just in case he doesn't start feeling better. I will call the vet out to take a look at him. After I give him some medicine, I am going to check on all of the other horses just to make sure they're doing all right as well. Oh, Stewie. Tiny. Oh, Stewie. Come back out, buddy. Huckleberry has started coming back to the barn with me in the morning because it is quite dry on the ground now. Hopefully Stewie will feel a little bit better as time goes on. I'm going to check him in maybe an hour and see if the medication is working. I did harrow the dry lot yesterday to make sure that it was getting dried out evenly, and I think it is about time I can start scraping all of these pens. I get asked all the time why I don't just have somebody come out and feed the horses for me and clean their stalls, and that is the most important thing to be observing every day with your horses. Really, the only thing different about Stewie this morning is he was not eating as usual, so that was a huge red flag that I needed to go check on him. If I just had somebody coming out here tossing everybody hay, they maybe wouldn't have noticed that. Instead of standing and feeling awful all day, I was able to get Stewie treated and hopefully he'll continue to improve. With all of the snow melted, Tiny has been on high alert checking all of the gopher holes. Her and Huckleberry are teaming up a lot of the time. Somehow she still fits it into her schedule to hassle me if I sit down and don't keep working. With Stewie not feeling so great, I am going to give the rest of the horses just a little bit of feed through anti-inflammatories just to catch anything before they start feeling too terrible. I'm going to let them eat their breakfast a little bit longer while I clean stalls. Hey buddy, come here. I turned Ziggy and Scarlet out this morning, and they're going to stay out there probably for a couple of days as long as it's nice. I've got to juggle around the horses in the barn so I can scrape out their pens. I'm thinking I'll be able to do Frisco and Prim's first and then move them over and let their pens dry out and then move them back and do the other ones. If I hadn't vaccinated a bunch of the horses yesterday, I would be more inclined to think that Stewie is colicking, but I'm pretty sure it's just some inflammatory response and he should be fine in a day or two. Just in case if he's not out there eating normally, I am going to bring him inside so I can keep an extra close eye on him.
Hey, buddy.
I haven't seen any gophers yet inside the barn, but Huckleberry is on high alert, ready to pounce in case he sees any. With all of the snow and ice melting, the stalls have been getting extra saturated, so I've been having to strip them quite often. Tiny usually doesn't come out in about this early in the morning, but since Huckleberry's here, I think she feels like she's a little bit more safe being out. After I get Frisco's stall all cleaned up, I'm going to head out and make sure all of the rest of the horses are doing okay.
Good boy.
Since I did keep a lot of the horses outside as much as possible this winter, my manure pile isn't looking too big. I think later on today I'm going to be able to start scraping all the pens and moving my pile around to make the perfect manure. After about an hour, I head out to check on Stewie again. Thankfully, he does seem like he's feeling a lot better. He is eating his breakfast, and I thought I would be able to wiggle in here and just take his temperature. All of his extra wriggling did let me know that he was feeling better. I think he was getting pretty annoyed with me, and he did lift his leg like he really wanted to get back to his breakfast. Normal horse temperature is around 100 degrees, give or take a degree, so Stewie's came down 2 whole degrees, and he is now normal. Just like humans, when you vaccinate a horse, there can be some general discomfort. Since I did do it in their necks, they may be a little bit sore, and that could be why Stewie was just not wanting to eat. When I went around to give some feed to Scarlet and Ziggy, I did notice that Ziggy's neck was hurting him.
Come here, buddy.
Since Ziggy is an Arabian, he does carry his head and neck a little bit higher than the other horses, so it might just bother him more putting his head down to eat. They've got a little bit of anti-inflammatories in their grain, so hopefully he will start feeling better soon. Ziggy did not have a fever, he just seemed like he was feeling really blue, and I think his neck is hurting him quite a bit. It's not super fun when these horses have a little bit more of a severe reaction to their vaccines, but I would rather struggle through 1 or 2 bad days than have a horse that is really at risk for something more serious. I know I've talked about it in the past, but one of the reasons that I do quarantine my horses is to keep my new horses from getting anything from my horses that are here all the time. Most horses can carry small viral loads of certain things, but when they are stressed or starved or just generally unhealthy, it can cause the virus to really affect an at-risk horse, where a normal horse would have enough immunity to fight it off and you would not even notice. There was one case of EHV, one locally, which is the neurologic strain, and it has been popping up every once in a while in Montana. Hopefully it'll be just the one horse and I won't hear about it again, but it did incentivize me to make sure all of my horses were up to date. For the most part, I use the guidelines set forth by the AAEP, which is the American Association of Equine Practitioners. They have a lot of guidelines for different types of horses, so if you're new to horses and are not sure where to start, I'll link that in the description. Of course, talk to your vet about these things, but it's nice to have some material to look through on your own.
Buddy.
Poor Zig was feeling extra pitiful. I can tell that his neck is really sore, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep an eye on that throughout the day. I've got a few more little chores to do this morning. It's maybe going to rain in an hour or 2. Huckleberry has been getting himself in a little bit of mischief this morning, and I better scoop him up and bring him back home. As I was cleaning up all of the horses' dishes, I did notice that Huckleberry was acting quite strange. It seems like Huckleberry got his first gopher of the year and was just sneaking it around, trying to find a place for safekeeping. He typically tries to take little prizes like this in the truck with him to bring home, but I think he's figured out by now that that is not allowed. I don't think he minds if I know where he puts his little prize, but I do know that he gets upset when Tiny sees it. Tiny can catch her own little gopher, so I don't know why he gets so worried about it.
Come on, Huckleberry. Drop it. Here, I'll cover it up for you. There. Keep him safe. There you go.
I gave him adequate time to dispose of his gopher properly, but eventually I had to load him up and take him home for the afternoon. After a little bit of lunch when I returned, I was happy to see that all of the horses were taking their afternoon naps. Pearl has been taking some serious naps lately, and now that the ground is dry, I have found she much prefers the sand to her little straw bed. It's not very fluffy anymore because I have been slowly chipping away at it as it dries up. But it's nice to see her getting a little bit of extra sleep.
Girl.
Ziggy still looks like he feels pretty sorry for himself, but they did eat the majority of their hay.
Buddy.
Currently, it is a little bit warmer than 60 degrees, so it is the perfect time and temperature to take a nice afternoon siesta. Stewie does like to lay down and sleep a lot, but I do think he is also feeling so much better than this morning.
All right, Stu.
After dragging this pen, it doesn't look too bad, but there is quite a buildup of poop from this winter that I need to tackle. If you guys are really serious about figuring out exactly what I do with my manure, I made a whole entire video on it last year, which I'll link in the description. A lot of people do not think about this part of managing this many horses, so it's important that you have some kind of plan in place. Nigel's is probably the hardest pen to scrape out because he does accumulate quite a bit of hay over the winter. Ideally, I would have waited another couple of really warm days to start this, but it is going to get cold. And I think my window is today and tomorrow. Prim and Frisco are over in Ziggy and Scarlett's stalls and runs, and now I'm going to lock up Nigel so I can scoop out his little run. He took full advantage of his extra freedom to test the boundaries of these pens and then finally moseyed into his stall. With him in a stall, I won't have to worry about him escaping, and he can stay in here and get some relief from the sun. It's actually quite hot out, and I need to readjust his little sunshade so he can stand under that when it gets more warm out. His tent has been super nice for the winter, but I did notice that when it's really sunny out, it does act like a little bit of a sauna. I took down some of the fence rails in between Frisco and Prim's pen just so it's easier for me to clean. Thankfully, I am pretty handy with the skid steer, so I can get most of this stuff up if the ground is not too slippery. Unfortunately, after I took a few scoops out of Nigel's pen, I did hit some ice, so it is still very slick. I did my best to clean out Prim and Frisco's runs. I do have this skid steer for today and tomorrow, so hopefully I'll be able to scrape a few little layers off, and then by tomorrow evening it should be dried out enough I can do a much better job. I got a few really terrible comments after showing exactly what it looks like. this time of year. With it getting so cold in the winter, there's really no way around the buildup of manure. It freezes pretty well after it leaves the horse's body, so unless you're out here with a pickaxe every single day, this is how the majority of people manage their outside runs. I don't really edit out any of the real life stuff that goes on around here because I think it's important for people to see. Part of living in a place that does have extreme temperatures and taking care of a lot of animals does involve their manure. Frisco and Scarlet do have quite a bit of footing underneath, so it is very tricky to just scrape it off the top and leave behind as much footing as I can. The amount of time between when the snow actually melts and it's ready to scrape is about a week, and that is not very long at all for the horses to have to deal with a little bit of muck. This type of manure management is perfectly adequate for the area that I live in. Even Nigel's front does have sand underneath as a base. It just is really hard to see this time of year. We had about 2 feet of snow that needed to melt, and that makes the ground extremely saturated. I did a few little test scoops of the boys' smaller dry lot, and it just was too wet to do today.
You okay, buddy? Come, Stewie.
I was able to scrape out a lot of the manure from the other larger dry lot. I was a little bit disappointed that Ziggy and Prim were not getting along when I turned them out the other day. They do know each other quite well, and I don't know if it was just too many other horses for them to interact peacefully, but with Frisco and Prim over on that side of the barn, it gives them a little bit more time to get reacquainted. With it being so nice out lately, I have noticed a lot of the birds are starting to come back. I'm not sure if this is the set of 3 little killdeer from last year. I don't know too much about these birds, but I have a feeling that it is 2 males fighting for the female. These birds are so well camouflaged. Even when they do have little tiny babies hatch, it is really a trick to find them. These birds are super cool. Tiny is actually scared of them, so she leaves them alone, and Huckleberry's got a lot more on his mind, so he usually also does not bother them. It'll be really interesting to see if I can keep track of these guys for the spring, and hopefully summer we might see a baby or 2 hatch out.
Nigel.
Nigel's pen is very slippery still, and I was starting to sink in with the skid steer, so I'm going to turn him back out so he can get some fresh air. As you can see, these 2 runs, I did a pretty good job of scraping them. There's a lot of good sand left that I'll need to redistribute across the runs. Nigel was a little bit confused that he was going back outside so soon, but was happy to be out there when he finally figured it out. By the time I finish this evening, I will have put in my first 12-hour day of the year. Even though this looks like a fairly unpleasant task, it is one of the most satisfying, and I'm excited to do it again tomorrow.
Hey, Zig.
With today going to be the best day yet. It was really fun to get to the barn a little bit extra early. There's a bunch of ducks that keep landing in the neighboring field, and I saw my bald eagle friend hunting. These first little tastes of spring are so welcome after a really long winter.
buddy, how are you gonna catch them? Hey, Manure. Scaring Pearl.
I spent a few hours this morning tidying up and getting ready for the heat wave. Frisco and Prim
Bill.
stayed inside yesterday. It is a very exciting day. Today I am going to see the spine doctor, and after waiting for a little bit, he did let me know that it is time for me to get back to riding. My neck is still not 100% better, but with his go-ahead, I will be happy to hop on some of the more calm horses I have. Thankfully, that didn't take too long, and I was able to zip right back to the barn to get back to work. Really nice to see the small arena is almost completely dried up, except a few little hay spots. Pearl's pen has one little puddle, but I'm hopeful that that will be gone in a day or two. You couldn't really tell, but yesterday there was still quite a bit of ice in Nigel's pen, which has melted.
Tiny, gopher.
It seems like today Tiny is spending most of her energy supervising me and completely ignoring a bunch of these little ground squirrels.
Better run.
That is the first little bugger I've seen in the barn, and it looks like he has a tunnel going underneath, so hopefully Tiny will take care of that. Even though I'm pretty handy with the skid steer, it is very tricky to get along the fences, and I was really trying hard not to accidentally break anything yesterday. I noticed that Prim was trying really hard to get her hooks into Ziggy again. She can be a very convincing mare when she wants to be. I'm still hopeful that her and Frisco will be able to go out with Ziggy and Scarlet after a few little attitude adjustments. The big arena is looking completely dry. I am going to have to start cleaning up the manure in here. The boys' regular dry lot does seem to be a bit better than yesterday, so I should be able to get in here and clean this all out. I haven't decided what exactly I'm going to do with it. I did spread a lot of the good manure here in the little middle area yesterday. I try to spread some every year so my manure pile isn't gigantic. It looks like Stewie is completely back to normal this afternoon, which is great. This bigger dry lot is just plain old dirt, so it does get a little bit dicey if you scrape down too far. Typically, once I start seeing big rocks, I assume that all of the manure is gone.
Come on, Lippy.
There were just a few little spots that were still frozen up in the corner that look like they are finally melting. For these boys, I did put their manure in a pile in the dry lot. I'm hoping to make a little bit of a windbreak for them. It does break down quite a bit being out there all winter, getting snowed on, and then just layers piling up. The boys in the smaller dry lot, sometimes I do put a little pile in there if I can't get it all out, but I'm hoping to scoop the majority of this out. I went back and forth a little bit whether or not to add it to my main pile, but then I decided just to put it out here on this little grass area. It does seem like it's broken down enough that I'll be able to spread it and it won't harm the grass at all. While composted manure is great for fertilizing, it does not have the same benefit if it's just fresh manure sprinkled on the field. Some of this built up manure is going to be fresher than others, so hopefully it won't have a negative impact on this grass. This area does have grass that is quite mature, so hopefully it'll be able to push through the layers. After scraping away for around 15 minutes, I started to melt the frozen ground that was underneath. This machine is pretty handy, but if you're not paying attention, you can get it stuck pretty easily in this kind of sludgy material. I'm just gonna keep going and peel away the layers and sludge as it melts. I was really hoping that I would be able to put all of the manure onto this middle grass area, but it looks like I am running out of room. The boys seem to be perfectly content taking little naps in the sun. I'm trying to get this scraped up as quickly as possible so it gets the best chance of drying out completely. We are supposed to be getting some rain and maybe snow in the next couple of days. In an effort to get this all dispersed, I decided to put some of it on the smaller pasture. It ended up working really well. The ground is actually pretty dry, so I wasn't tearing it up as I was spreading the manure out. It is in pretty big clumps and it's very wet still, so I will have to drag it later on this evening when I'm done scraping everything out. It looks like Nigel is thoroughly enjoying his little cabana. I would like to get back in here and remove some more of the material, but I think it might just be too slippery still. I do have trouble with these runs draining, so I tried to make a tiny little bit of a trench that hopefully will work better when it rains. I see Gus is flat out having a little bit of a snooze, and I went over to see what Pearl was doing, but she woke up pretty quickly. Even though I have a ton of stuff to do today, I'm trying really hard not to spend too much time doing one thing so I don't hurt my neck. The big dry lot looks like all of the wet spots are finally firmed up. I am going to try and push some of this manure back in and scoop it up. It's just a little bit tricky around the fence. I think after about an hour or two, I'll be able to get back in this smaller dry lot and finish the job. I noticed that Studman had made his own personal little stall to keep the other boys away from him.
It's your own little space. Your own little spot, boy.
I'm not sure whether it was a good idea or not to fertilize the pasture. I guess I'll find out in a week or two after I spread it, and if the grass comes up, then great, and if it doesn't, it's just a small area that I'll have to mitigate later on. Some of the horses are in desperate need of a bath, so I'm going to get those going while I wait for everything to dry up. It also looks like Prim is making some headway with becoming best buds with Ziggy.
Ziggo!
Over the course of just a few hours, Ziggy remembered that he liked Prim way more than Scarlet, and when I put her back in her stall, he had an absolute fit. It was a little bit ridiculous that he got so upset given how nasty Prim was to him the other day.
Ziggo! Okay? Zig. Oh. You okay, girl?
After a few minutes of Ziggy shenanigans, Scarlet got really upset that she was now his second choice. It'll be really nice to see these two running around in the pasture in the spring when it's finally time to turn everybody out. I feel kind of bad for Ziggy. He gets so attached so quickly. I'd love to spend my whole day watching him, but I've got more things I need to get done. Pearl is still very itchy, so I am going to be treating her for lice today, just in case they're hiding where I cannot see them.
Ziggo.
I've got a special concoction mixed up for Pearl, which is just fly spray and some coat conditioner.
Prim.
It looks like Ziggy has calmed down quite a bit. Hopefully he will forget about Prim by dinner time. This is only Pearl's second real bath, and she's starting to look better every single time I wash her. Her medication is definitely working because she is shedding out pretty close to how a normal horse would this time of year. Her body condition score is very much improved since when I bought her. She still could gain a little bit of muscle mass along her top line and behind her shoulder blades, but for her age, she is looking very good.
Come on, Nigel.
In the time it took me to get Pearl washed, it does look like Nigel's pen has firmed up quite a bit. I'm just going to pop him inside and then scrape out some more.
Boy, Nigel.
After walking around, I decided there are a few other things that I would rather do than struggle through Nigel's pen. It still is very wet, and I think I'll just be wasting my time this evening if I do decide to scrape it some more. He's got just a little bit on the edges, and I can definitely get that by hand once it's more dry. In addition to Pearl being pretty disgusting, Frisco Bill was in desperate need of a wash. When everything melted, he laid himself right down in the nastiest slop, and it kind of got shellacked onto his hair. I have plenty of hot water left to give him a good scrub, but he's a little bit antsy because it is springtime and Prim has been screaming at Ziggy this whole entire time. For as old as Frisco is, he still is quite a sassy guy. Since I will be able to start riding, I have thought pretty hard about who exactly that's going to be, and even though Frisco does dole out a little bit more sass than I probably should be dealing with, he is probably the safest horse that I have. I've been trying very hard to retire him the last couple of years, but every season he just seems to get sassier and sassier, and I know he would like to be in some kind of work. It'll also be nice for him to be in a little bit better shape if I haul Prim and Scarlet and Ziggy out. Those four could go on trips together. With Scarlet being much more sensible these days, I think it wouldn't be unrealistic to have Frisco pony her around some new places. Even though it looks like he is slipping around quite a bit in the freshly scraped pen, Frisco still is 100% sound. There's really no reason why I should stop riding him other than I do want him to have some kind of retirement. He is a very busy-minded horse, and right now he spends all of his extra energy making sure that Prim is close by. Maybe if I were to put him back into a little bit of work, he would have less time for these kinds of shenanigans. One of the reasons that Prim is in the stall she's in is so the other horses cannot see her. She is very convincing when she wants to make friends with one of the other boys, so she's pretty hard to resist. I'm also hoping she will settle down a little bit once I get her into some regular work. Springtime is a little bit tricky because I do have to wait for the grass to come out, and there are limited turnout possibilities for all of the horses at once. With Prim being such a floozy, I just cannot turn her out with a much larger group of horses. She probably wouldn't hurt any of the boys, but the boys would definitely fight amongst themselves more than I would like. Scarlet seems to be quite a bit more independent than Prim. It might be how she was brought up. She was very young when I got her, and she should have been with her mother. That may have forced her into being a lot more brave than she really should have been. As Scarlet was growing up, she did get turned out with a few different horses at key points. I think that really allowed her to understand her dynamics and how to be respectful of other horses. I did get a comment about breeding Prim, and while I would like to have a little baby around here, there are just so many horses that I could get and help. I just don't see the sense in making more. Some people also think that breeding a horse will quiet them down, and while they are bred, they just won't come into heat, so sometimes that can help. It's really not something that's on my radar right now. I am not really set up to have pregnant mares and little tiny babies. It seems like the old out of sight, out of mind trick is starting to work for Ziggy. By the time he gets his dinner, I think he will have totally forgotten about her.
Stewie.
It's around 5:30,
Boys.
so definitely time for some dinner for these horses. I strategically placed them to where they wouldn't be in the way of my scraping that I still need to get done. Thankfully, after her bath, Pearl did not decide to roll, so I'm going to give her some more dinner and her special grain. It's really nice to see the round pen finally drying up. I'm just going to try and get this one little puddle out of the way. There's still some ice around the edges where the sun doesn't hit during the day, but we are definitely heading in the right direction. Even after his dinner, it looks like Ziggy is still wondering where Prim might be.
Hey, Stewie. Hey, Stewie. Feeling better, buddy? Let's see.
Since yesterday morning, Stewie has been continuing to improve. There's no heat or swelling, and he seems to be back to his normal self. I was hoping that he would stay over and eat his dinner, but he just cannot help himself by investigating anything I'm doing.
Oh, Stewie. Woohoo. Hey, buddy. Come on, Stewie. Come on, Stewie.
I tried really hard to maneuver all of the manure I scraped up into a usable mound for these horses. I just added a little bit to their pre-existing mound and tried to make it a little bit more of a windbreak for them. I got the majority of work done that I needed to with the skid steer. There's a few more little areas that I can get by hand with the gator. Since we are expecting some moisture over the next couple of days, I do have to spread out all the manure that I laid out. I did want to show you guys what it looks like. This has probably been composted for maybe 5 years. This is super good for fertilizing. This is probably around 3 years old. It was in the center of my big pile. I scooped it out, and then this is basically the fresh stuff. As it sits here, I'll turn it around, and then it'll eventually break down and turn into really good compost.
Zig.
The sun is starting to go down and the temperature is dropping a little bit. Thankfully, Ziggy is calmed down. I'm going to put on another layer and then finish some more chores.
Come on. Hands straight. Second dinner? Oh, Gussie. Hey, Whippy. Hey. boys. Standing up.
Tiny kept me on task until there was no light left in the sky. I was really happy I was able to get pretty much everything I had planned done today. 2 12-hour days in a row is a good test to see exactly how my body is feeling. Even though I'm not at 100%, I am super thankful that I am still able to get out here and put in a few really long days this time of year. Even though there was a lot of work to get done, the few sunshiny days in a row really helped lift my spirits. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.